What's up, Taiwan? I'm Yvonne, with news from here in Taiwan and around the world. With the 32% U.S. tariff looming over Taiwan, policymakers here are scrambling to come up with a special relief budget to respond to those levies. Though ruling and opposition parties seem to make headway last week, opinions are once again split on where money should be spent. Eric Gao has more.
Close, but no cigar. Taiwan's ruling Democratic Progressive Party has worked hard to push through the legislature a 410 billion NT dollar special budget, which at the current exchange rate is over 13 billion US dollars. Part of that budget is to help Taiwanese society weather a potential 32% tariff from US President Donald Trump, which is on a 90-day hold. The other part, according to Premier Zuo Tai, is to better prepare Taiwan to respond to what he calls the evolving international situation. To make his case, Zuo last week visited Taiwan's opposition Kuomintang and Taiwan People's Party legislative caucuses. That's because the ruling DPP does not have decisive power in that chamber. And his efforts seem to have paid off, at least initially, when the budget proposal passed its first reading in the legislature in the same week.
希望各党团能够签出不复议的同意书。我现在国民党签了，民进党签了，我等一下会跟民众党的党鞭来请求他们的协助。
But those prospects have seemingly fallen through. Both the KMT and TPP have just put forward their own versions of the special relief budget to compete with the ruling party's proposal. They remove items in the original DPP budget plan that they say have nothing to do with U.S.-Taiwan trade. One of those items is a more than $3 billion US subsidy for the country's main energy utility, Taipower, which has been operating with multi-billion-dollar losses. It's an issue that has long divided ruling and opposition parties, stemming from disagreements over energy policy.
过去已经补贴了3000亿，补贴了3000亿，结果台电的亏损一样持续的扩大。
The opposition's proposals also slash things like talent acquisition and drone programs for defense. Instead, they want to dole out money to the public to help boost domestic consumer spending.
我再次强调，我们这次要解决的是经济的冲击，不是军事的一个冲突。所以，我们把这个1500亿把它省下来之后呢，真正我们把它放在民众消费的韧性，这就是我们今天的最大的一个重点。
In response, Premier Zuo on Tuesday once again called for cross-party unity. He also argued that giving cash to the public now is not the best way to solve the problems at hand.
此时此刻，是我们汇聚力量、积沙成塔，共同面对国际情势，对产业用集体力量来支持的最好时候，也是唯一最好的方法。只有团结在一起，力量才会更大。
The consensus among Taiwan's political parties is that this special budget is needed. But opinions still differ on how the money is best spent. And that is delaying much-needed support for local industries to cope with potential U.S. tariffs. Joseph Wu, Leslie Liao, and Eric Gao for TaiwanPlus.
One of Taiwan's biggest computer makers, ASUS, says it's well prepared to handle currency swings and U.S. tariffs thanks to its diversified business structure.
那中长期这部分的因，我想我们非常有信心。各位可能知道，我们透过这个多元的市场布局，那特别是华硕在这个非美元的市场布局，大概是超过50%啊。所以透过这个多元化的这个，一方面透过多元化的这个生产基地的布局，来提高我们营运的韧性。
Who was speaking in Taipei at a preview before Computex, one of the world's largest tech trade shows. The company says it will focus on AI hardware from servers to PCs, a strategy it calls ubiquitous AI. Executives from Intel, Amazon Web Services, and McKinsey also spoke at the event. China's military is still facing major corruption issues. That's according to a New York Times op-ed following reports that top People's Liberation Army General He Weidong, once in charge of planning a Taiwan invasion, was sacked. So what could this mean for China's military readiness? Defense reporter Jaime Ocon spoke to GlobeSec Associate Fellow Bryce Barrows to find out.
I want to first start off with, in the past couple of years, we've seen at least a dozen PLA officials and high-ranking government officials get purged as part of this effort from Chinese President Xi Jinping to manage corruption. Let's first start off with painting a picture. How big of a problem is corruption in the PLA?
Corruption is a very large problem within the PLA. It's a systemic issue, and it's related to the PLA being a party army, not a national army, and lacking that national sort of character of being nonpartisan, being as apolitical as possible, means that it loses various checks and balances that make a military even more ready because it's not focused on engaging in very deep politics, right? So having an independent judiciary within the military, inspector generals, meritocratic promotions, as much as one can have. Those are all things that get impacted by not having corruption, or rather our products of not having a corrupt system. And whereas the PLA doesn't have all that because it is a part of the CCP itself, and the CCP itself has a lot of issues that are systemic related to corruption.
So let's talk a little bit about the operational side of corruption, in the sense of how it affects planning. Of course, you know, when we look at, it looks like a good number of these corruption cases are coming from the Eastern Theater Command. Want to get your thoughts on how that affects planning in terms of a Taiwan contingency. Why is getting rid of corruption in that theater level command so important for operations around Taiwan?
So to answer that question, I want to separate the theoretical versus what has actually happened in practice. In theory, Xi Jinping and other members that high up within the CCP, as well as anyone that's leading the PLA, CMC, and whatnot, they should want to make sure that that command in particular is not only loyal to Beijing, right, and make sure that they're loyal to the party itself, but they have minimal issues so that they could go ahead and have the readiness and the capability at the tactical, operational, and strategic levels to do whatever they need to do related to a Taiwan or East China Sea contingency. That said, separating the theoretical versus the practical, I do think some of the issues that you've seen related to Eastern Theater Command show that there are concerns that Xi Jinping or other people that are high up in the party have related to going into the fourth term, right? So even though in theory that particular command should have a better grasp on corruption so that they can execute Taiwan contingencies, East China Sea contingencies and whatnot in a better way, there are still issues that they have within it because people that are higher up in the party might not fully feel comfortable with certain commanders, leaders, and whatnot being close with other potential rivals or other figures that could be viewed as potentially usurping or undermining Xi Jinping's sort of control within Beijing.
And is there a specific branch within the PLA that maybe more corruption cases are popping out more than others?
I can't name any specific sort of stats off the top of my head, but I can speak to some of the recent cases with the PLA rocket force, related to having water being used as like, a fuel instead of actual, gas or whatever for weapon systems, right? I mean, that's a huge example of where corruption and readiness and the idea of wanting to save face for those commanders potentially, or just not want to explain any of the problems that they might have, undermines the readiness to be able to execute missions related to the area of operation or the area of responsibility for Eastern Theater Command related to a Taiwan contingency or something related to East China Sea or anything tied to Japan.
That was Bryce Barrows, Associate Fellow at GlobeSec. Penalties could soon go up for drivers who hit pedestrians after failing to yield at crosswalks. 83 of the 366 pedestrians killed at crosswalks last year were hit by drivers who did not yield. A new proposal that could take effect in June would raise fines on drivers who hurt people walking on the crosswalk. The fine for minor injuries will rise from $240 to $600, while the fine for major injuries would double that to $1,200. Thank you for watching What's Up Taiwan. You can visit the TaiwanPlus website or follow us on social media for more stories from Taiwan and around the world. Finally, take a look at these life-size replica Formula One cars made of Lego in Prague. I'm Yvonne Yang. Take care, and I'll see you next time.